I'm Rima Basharnitsan, the founder and CEO of Dialogue. Welcome to 10 by 20, a series of 10 questions discussed in 20-minute dialogues with local and international leaders doing visionary work at the intersection of people, technology, and society. Welcome back to 10 by 20. Today I'm thrilled to introduce Jeff McSpadden, co-founder and CEO at Composure. Composure is an evidence-based digital audio company that delivers original soundscapes for senior living communities. As an entrepreneur, technologist, and lifelong musician and composer, Jeff has dedicated himself to the pursuit of sound as a vital ingredient to human thriving. Before founding Composure, Jeff was a composer and musician for over 15 years. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Good to be here with you.
Good to have you. So tell me everything. We always start, as I mentioned, we always start off these things with like a quick moment of how did you decide music was your thing? And like, how did you grow up? Who inspired you to kind of go in this direction?
Well, I have a lot of musical heroes, but for me, being, older now, I can kind of reflect with some perspective on what kind of led me to this point. And it's really interesting for me to realize that even as a little kid, music was my go-to source for self-soothing and to help me feel grounded, to sort of weather, challenging times, happy times, celebrating it. And it was just always a presence for me. And it's what drove me to want to pursue it in a more sort of learned fashion. But even before I started formally studying music and instruments and so forth, I'd spend a lot of time as a kid making up my own songs, singing them to myself, teaching myself in very broad terms how to use and play different instruments, from piano to guitar to, sorting the little pillows on my living room couch as drums and pretending to play drums along with records.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
I was always just, it was like a dog to a bone in terms of me and music.
That's amazing. Did your parents play a lot of music when you were younger?
Practically nothing. They had a pretty good record collection.
Wow.
So I was a Beatles fan from the age of, 5, whenever it was that I discovered their record collection. But my dad played music in high school. He also, it's very frustrating for me because he actually has perfect pitch. So he can hear a song on the radio and sit at the piano and just play it first hearing. I always thought that was deeply impressive. I have an older brother who also studied violin while I was. He was 7 years, almost 8 years older than me. So by the time he was in high school and learning to play violin, I was little and I was listening to that process and watching that process and seeing him play concerts and so forth in school. And that was a deep influence as well. He also, he got his driver's license early, in my life, and riding around the car with him and listening to all the latest sort of like new wave hits and things like that in the 80s that he would listen to was a big influence as well.
Oh, interesting. I love how you guys are in some way, shape, or form are musical and like it kind of organically all transpired.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now you are in this moment where you were a composer for a number of years. You were doing music, you were doing what you love. And then you realized that like this can benefit the aging, the elderly, and how did the company come about, and how did it all come to fruition?
Well, it's been a process of exploration and discovery for sure. But, throughout my career, even as a performing musician, I used to be a trumpet player and I'd play in different sort of like, jazz, classical, pop settings and so forth. And throughout my career playing, I was always fascinated with the sounds that we're producing on stage are influencing an audience to feel a certain way. You get people up on their feet, you get them dancing around. There's a myriad of sort of reactions. People tear up when they connect with music sometimes, and I always found that fascinating. And the more I kind of became like an armchair scientist, looking
Mm-hmm.
at what's the biological response that's responsible for these kinds of reactions. I just became deeply curious about that connection between, a person's well-being and the sounds that they're hearing, and whether
Mm-hmm.
it's intentional sounds with the music they choose to listen to, or it's environmental sounds. Like I'm here in New York. There's lots of sirens and plenty of
Mm-hmm.
people making noise, outside of our window every day. These kinds of things deeply fascinated me, and what kind of spurred me to explore starting my own company was taking all of that curiosity and combining it with sort of developing technologies at the time. So the various the earliest iteration of the company was exploring immersive technology, so VR and AR,
Mm-hmm.
as a dynamic way to engage the listener and have them participate in
Mm-hmm.
a very easy way in influencing the sounds that they heard. So, through that work and some of the studies and what we found to be true through that work, it started evolving into a relationship we now continue to have with senior living communities and specifically their dementia population,
Mm-hmm.
because the disease of dementia it ravages the brain.
Mm-hmm.
It's an utter destroyer. There's no known cure yet. It's a terrible, terrible disease, and it limits people slowly over time in terms of
Mm-hmm.
how they communicate, the decisions they can make, the way in which they can engage and be part of the world around them
Mm-hmm.
changes significantly. But the one thing, one of the very few things I should say that is not impacted by the progression of that disease is the region of the brain that processes sound. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I say the word sound specifically because speech and being able to interpret instructions and things that people are saying to you, that's handled by multiple regions of the brain that are hampered by the disease. But basically just trying to, if you listen to a piece of music that you recognize from your childhood, or you're listening to some new piece of music that you've never heard before but moves you in a certain way, that part of the brain is relatively unaffected by the progression of the disease. And it's something that we're really deeply excited to explore even further in the work that we're doing.
Yeah, that's interesting. And how long has the company been around? And also, over the course of that time, have you guys been tracking? I imagine that you've been tracking the success rate and sort of the change in people as you are working with more and more um, institutions, I would say, or right?
Yeah. It's fair, just sort of as an umbrella term. Well, the company's been around for a couple of years.
Mhm.
We've been, conducting a lot of our activities sort of relatively quietly. As we really wanted to come into this market of senior living with a firm understanding and an evolving understanding of what challenges, problems, opportunities
Mhm.
there are for us to address, and how would we go about addressing those needs and challenges.
Mhm.
And so, we've been developing very closely with these communities, and seeing, as you said, sort of what we're noticing our impact to be for folks living with dementia has been really inspiring. I mean, there are some individuals we've worked with who, little did we know, they weren't going to be alive for very much longer. They may have, we may have entered into their lives in the final few weeks. And to see that we've had an impact in terms of, quality of life, being able to offer them something that really cut through, the symptoms and side effects of the disease, and really connect with them on a wellness level, on a well-being level. And there's a quote I kind of butcher it a little bit, but in summary, it's from Leonard Bernstein, the 20th century composer, conductor, educator. He had once said something to the effect of, music is the only art form that speaks directly to the heart, and first does not need to be processed by the mind and considered by the mind. And I think it's really true. I mean, there's very few other forms of expression that connect with people right away, the way music does. And I would extend that further to say sound in general. So the sound of nature, the sound of familiar environments, or things that take you back to an earlier time in your life. These, the sound and smell. That's kind of the two that do it, right? So being able to deliver something that, again, has shown, to have this really positive impact on people's quality of life, in a way that doesn't create side effects, that doesn't is not an onerous process. It's a very passive kind of process, listening casually to sounds in your environment, and then know that we were able to elevate that quality of life, no matter how long they had left to be here with us, has been really pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, for sure. So if you were to summarize like a couple of questions that are absolutely the ones that you're answering right now through the work that Composure is doing, what would those be?
Yeah. So our whole mission, in a very short way of saying it, is we want to turn sound into medicine. And you and I had a brief conversation about this, I think, the last time we spoke. And there's a lot of questions in terms of, how to push that mission forward. There's a lot of questions that come up, because if you're really sort of looking at the analogy between sound and its delivery and how that relates to medicine in its current form, you have to consider dosage. You have to consider delivery method. You have to consider timing. You have to consider, frequency and so forth, meaning how often to deliver a certain medicine, right? And so we're really trying to figure those questions out. Like, what is the proper dosage when we're delivering sound as a therapeutic intervention, right? How does that get delivered? When does it get delivered? What is the proper content for the individual? And that content for the individual might change depending on time of day, depending on use case and need, and so forth. And even, I mean, we've already seen evidence that what we do translates all the myriad types of dementia that someone could be diagnosed with, and it also translates across early, middle, and late stage progression of the disease. So, it's really great to know that we can kind of have a standard delivery of care across the spectrum there. But, it doesn't mean we don't have room for improvement and tailoring to someone with Lewy body dementia versus vascular dementia versus Alzheimer's. And, this person actually sleeps just fine, but the environment is creating a problem. Or this other person is not sleeping well because of some physical manifestation that distracts them from sleep. So there's all kinds of things that we can sink our teeth into. And these are, I guess, to answer your question, right, in a very long format, there is it's all of those different variables that we're trying to define and create answers for.
One thing came to mind, and I was thinking about this, you have probably been thinking about this, is how does this whole AI thing that we're experiencing, this random blow up of things that we've been talking about for 30 years, well, maybe not so random, but how have you been thinking about it impacting the work that you guys are doing at Composure, but also how might it impact the world of composing music?
Yeah. So I've spent many years being very, very skeptical and resistant to the AI movement, particularly when it comes to trying to train an AI model on creative pursuits, like creative writing, artistic pursuits, right? I'll say that I'm not as skeptical anymore as I am sort of intentionally exploring and excited for the possibility of AI becoming a super tool for humans.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because initially the sort of knee-jerk reaction to AI is, oh my gosh, we're all going to get replaced. It's all going to sort of take over the world, and humans will become obsolete. Well, I think music is a really good example of how AI could potentially give creators wings. Because, you know, there have been other technological developments over the years that people said, okay, this is the end of the composer, this is the end of the musician, the end of artists. And frankly, like I've had conversations with people in the AI space about this, particularly AI for music. And I think what most experts agree to, even in that field, and they're promoters of the technology and the development of it, is that there's some intangible qualities to creating music out of nothing that is an impossible variable to teach a model to do. Because, I mean, I'm an AI machine in the sense that the music I create is an output from the input I've had in my life, right? Now, that could be musical input and influence. Like I said, I was a Beatles fan, have been since the age of 5, right?
Yeah.
But it's also my lived experience.
Yeah.
And it's not just the input of the outside world. It's also been how I've been in relation to that. Okay. So I'm waxing philosophical on this question, but I want to, it's really in service to the ultimate answer, which is, I don't see how training AI models with the end goal of replacing a creative individual is possible. What I do see, and is going to be deeply inspiring and valuable, is how you can train an AI to offload the things that creative individuals have been struggling to get past just to get to the good stuff. That'll become the real exciting future of AI, especially in the creative arts. Is, you know, you've already seen it with things like DALL-E 2 and Midjourney and all these other sort of visual AI creation platforms, where it's the quality of the prompt into the AI that gets the quality output. And that prompt is the human element that an AI currently is not good at.
So you see it as enhancement, but not a replacement, which is a great kind of, I mean, I agree with you, especially in what you guys are working on. But man, it's kind of interesting to see how advanced it can get and where the limitations too over the next, like, my instinct was to say 10 years, but it's probably less than 2 that we have, right? Yeah. Even earlier.
I think there are things that yet to be shared with the public that would blow all our minds.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm not really, I'm deeply fascinated, and I always want to sort of be on top of what is going on in that space. But, you know, for us as a company too, right? We don't even, some people have asked us, is our content AI generated content? Is it adaptive? Is it, you know, responsive? You know, that kind of thing. And I'm not saying there won't be a future in which that might play a role for us, but we actually see, you know, as a buddy of mine actually refers to it as sort of the centaur of solutions, where you've got half of it is human and the other is machine. And the benefit of that configuration is you're bringing the best of both, what both can do, to the table and bringing them to bear. And we still feel, for what we're doing, that human created audio sound content is the most engaging and most beneficial to the end user. So you've got human created, human received. Everything in between is fair play. It's like, maybe AI is going to play a role at some point in there, in how we deliver it, how we measure, how we respond, all of those things. That I could see being, I mean, the technology is there already. It's just about finding the right sort of configuration there.
Yeah, that's really exciting and really interesting to watch.
Yeah.
So you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Let's try it.
So these are, you can just respond as like a word or a sentence, whatever feels natural for you.
Great.
So when do you feel most connected to others?
When I'm listening to them.
Oh, that's a really good answer. When and where are you happiest?
Okay, there's a theme growing here. When I'm listening to my favorite music or nature sounds.
Okay. What intersection of disciplines are you currently most fascinated by?
Well, this is picking up on where we left off at the prior section. The intersection between AI and the pursuit of human purpose and meaning in our lives.
What's one thing you wish to pass down to the next generation?
Well, it's one thing that's made of two parts, if that's fair. It's something that my brother taught me, which is trust the process. And then the other element is, this borrows from Buddhist philosophy, which is, it's not the thing that causes suffering, it's your relationship to that thing that is causing, and it's your attachment to that thing. And I think if you remain, in trust of the process and explore healthy detachment from all the exterior pluses, minuses, good, bad, all that in our life. It's super hard, but if you can continue to check in with yourself and ride that path, I think you're going to be just fine.
Awesome. But thanks so much, Jeff.
Absolutely. This is a lot of fun.
Fun.
I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
Thanks for tuning in to Dialogue's 10 by 20 interview series, where we ask 10 questions in 20 minutes to profile international leaders working at the intersection of people, technology, and society. That's all for today's episode. Like and subscribe below to get notified for our upcoming interviews. Follow us on Instagram at dialogue_co.